Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for another restful episode of true, scary stories to help you fall asleep. Today, we're going to be reading some creepy encounter horror stories. I hope you enjoy them. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more scary stories to help you fall asleep. So now, without further ado, lay back, relax, and enjoy these true scary stories. The scariest thing just happened to me. I was in my boyfriend's diesel truck, and this Range Rover almost clipped me. So I was coming around a corner leaving the gym parking lot and flipped them off. They proceeded to take their car out of park and follow me out of the parking lot and chase me down through town. I drove to the police station and lost them, but they had every intent to follow me home as I was weaving in and out of block after block. I shouldn't have flipped them off, and will think next time before engaging with someone. My sister thinks the maintenance guy is weird. I'm speaking on behalf of my little sister because she's paranoid on anything coming back to her. I'll try and keep it short. She's lived at the apartment unit for almost 3 years. Everything about the property is well maintained and it's a nice community, but she's very concerned about one of the maintenance guys. She's had encounters where in the mornings, despite leaving at odd times to go walk somewhere, she prefers to go in the mornings or on lunch. She will encounter him suddenly as she's leaving the property. This occurs about 8 out of 10 times on average. She vocalized that at first he was nice, but she's very independent and doesn't like asking for help, and rather figure things out yourself. So when he goes out of his way to open doors, and once he offered to drive her to a postal service to drop off a package, she said from this moment she did not feel comfortable being anywhere on the complex. It was just going to be her in her room or even crossing paths. I visited over winter break and got to scope out the maintenance guy, and he definitely has an overly nice personality that you just can't trust. No one is ever that nice. It's just not realistic. The final straw was that she's been monitoring her Ring camera and saved videos of him walking by the door, either to do a maintenance task somewhere on the floor. And strange enough, she got a video of him coming up to the door but backing off. Almost like you're subconsciously thinking about the people who live in the unit and seems distracted. My sister pleaded a case to the property manager, but from what it sounded like, it was more forward that she seems safe on doing, despite the manager vouching that he is not anyone of concern and it's his personality. I disagreed, insisting that she should be careful and make note of anything strange on the cameras or crossing paths, even when she switches up her schedule. She told me she hopes to move out of the city by August. I told her if anything comes up, I would make the trip to visit again. I have always been creeped out by the sound of a big truck idling. If I'm in my house and I hear that splitting muffler and bassy rumble, I have the urge to get on the floor and hide. I never understood why until I connected it to an experience in a small logging town when I was about 10. I was with my dad and siblings visiting my grandma. I grew up in a town of only around 3,000, so when I say grandma lived in a tiny town, I mean postage stamp size. Being a timber town, there were towering evergreens surrounding it on all sides, almost seeming to swallow the houses and scamp businesses right up. I always got a bad, creepy vibe from the place. There was just a stillness that seems ominous, like people were hanging out in the shadows, just watching the fresh meat in town. Dramatic, I know, but you have to understand that I was a kid in the 90s. raised on a steady diet of unsolved mysteries, Rescue 911, and horror movies. In other words, I was paranoid. In my mind, the chances were good a kidnapping could happen at any time, anywhere. Once while in my hometown, I was walking with my family and noticed a man in a black trench coat was walking parallel to us on the opposite side of the street. And just that mundane occurrence made me break down crying. Looking back, I was exposed to way too much as a kid, but I also love true crime now, so I guess it worked out. Pardon the digression. So, my dad and siblings and I were taking a stroll from my grandma's house to the main street, which happened to have an antique shop. We wandered in to look around and kill time before supper. Immediately, a large man with overalls and a long red beard stood up from behind the counter and put his hands on the counter. "Well, hello," he said to us, but he looked me dead in the eyes. I averted my eyes as one of my main personal rules was to not make eye contact with strange men, lest they want to kidnap me. I had an Archie and Veronica comic curled up in my hands, and he asked what it was. When I showed him, he got a weirdly determined look on his face and went to the back room. I was confused, but before long, he came back out to a glass counter with a giant stack of Archie comics, dirty and mildewed, tied together with some kind of twine. "And there's more where that came from," he said, still serious, like he was earnestly trying to impress me. "Wow," my dad said. "That's neat, isn't it, honey?" "Yeah, that's pretty cool," I said, trying to be polite, but just feeling off with the whole situation. My dad then got distracted by my little brother and strode off, and the man motioned me over. I didn't go any closer because I was freaked out. He shuffled up a little closer to me and had his voice lowered. "You know, I only got grandsons. I want a little girl." He had a sly smile on his face now. Despite my surge of fear, I tried to tell myself, "Calm down, he's just a lonely old man." But my heart was pounding and my stomach was flopping. "Do you like horses?" he continued, leaning in closer. "I got horses you can ride. I got tons of comics. Would you want to be my girl and have all that fun?" I froze. He may have been a lonely grandpa, but I was 10, and this felt very creepy. I could also smell his rancid breath, and his skin had a greenish hue that just added to my horror. Incidentally, my dad was rounding us kids up right about that time. He thanked the man at the counter. "You all visiting? I haven't seen you around here," the man said, which usually happened in interactions with townfolk but scared me in this circumstance. "Yes, my mother lives right on blank and blank streets," my clueless father replied, giving him the cross streets. "Oh, that's just about a minute as the crow flies," the burly man said cheerfully. "Yep. She's the one with the giant chestnut tree in the yard," Dad boasted. I blanched. Now he could pinpoint the exact house my grandma lived at. This man wanted a girl. I could tell badly. What's to stop him from coming to get me? I tried to explain to my dad, but he never doubted the goodness of anyone, much to his detriment sometimes. I remember sleeping alone in a room that night that faced the street. I was sobbing and picturing the window being slid open by this crazy red-headed maniac. All of a sudden, at around midnight, out of the silence comes a rumbling engine that just stops and proceeds to idle in front of my grandma's house for several minutes. I peeped outside through the Venetian blinds above the bed and then ducked back onto the bed as soon as I saw headlights and a strange truck in the street. I did not see if it was in fact the man from the antique shop. And since I'm alive, I'm fine with that. I didn't sleep much that night, between my fear of imminent harm and the spooky porcelain dolls in my grandma's room that stared vacantly at me. And that's how I came to fear the sound of an idling engine. Hey everyone, I'm newer to posting on Reddit. I wanted to ask what anyone thought about this situation. I just came home from a coffee shop where I went alone. While I was there, I sat down at a very small table against the wall with 2 seats. I was sitting in one seat and the other was empty. I was just working on my computer, and a woman came and sat down across from me without a word. She plugged her charger into the plug right by my leg, and then just sat there. She went somewhere, then came back. She was doing her makeup. As she finished up, a man she seemed to know came and told her something, so she got up and left with him. Hours passed, and she did not come back to the table. I think they left as I did not see her again. Everything was fine until I was packing up to go. When I closed my computer, I saw 3 items that she left on the table. It was nail clippers, an old pop socket for a phone, and what appeared to be a pamphlet. I left them there and told the staff to be careful. I just found the whole encounter odd. She literally did not say a word to me and just sat at the tiny table with me. It was awkward, but I didn't feel unsafe till I got home and told my partner what happened. I don't know if this matters, but I asked her if she was good, but she was just kind of mumbling in what sounded like another language. Now that I'm writing this, I'm actually genuinely worried that she was being trafficked. Does anyone have any thoughts? Thank you. This happened to me today, and it shook me to my core. I'm still crying a little as I type this. I went to the bus stop after an appointment, and he was already waiting there. He started off with some small talk about horror books and some video games. He asked why I was nervous and shaking, so I informed him about my ADHD and how I was taking medicine for it. He said I didn't need medicine. All I needed was a hand to hold with someone like him. That was the first red flag, as he was serious when he said this. We boarded the bus together. I was seated at the window, and he was seated right next to me. We talked for a while about games some more, when he asked to hold my hand. My hands are almost permanently cold, so I figured it wouldn't do any harm. He asked if I could come home with him. Red flag number 2. A while after, he put my leg onto his, and he kissed my cheek. That was where I drew the line. I pushed him away and told him not only am I in a relationship, I wasn't interested in guys. He spent the rest of the ride apologizing, complimenting me, talking about himself and how he was sleeping with 3 other women, but also not in a relationship, and asking to hold my hand again, which I declined, and claiming he would be my friend and maybe something a little more. I kept repeating that I am taken and gay, to which he laughed and said that he could be my super gay boyfriend. I told him that I'm not interested and to leave me alone, rushing off the bus and hiding behind a pillar at the location. Not even a minute later, he had followed me off and was looking for me. I darted out without him seeing me and hid there until I knew he was gone. I'm posting this because one of the things he told me was downright gut-wrenching. I don't even need to take the bus. I just do it to find people like you. I've reported him to CSA, but not the police yet. He told me his full name as he was talking about himself, so I probably could give the police a name and a description if I did decide to talk to them. But right now, I'm just shaken up and scared. I'm not going to add lots of really specific details here because I feel like if I do, someone will figure out I wrote this. But I am a junior in high school, a 17-year-old female, and my dad's friends had a small meetup sometime back, and one of his friends was there. At the beginning of the party, he was acting fairly normal and I didn't think much of him. Then he started touching and caressing my knee whenever we sat down in a very uncomfortable way. He'd even be so bold as to caress my thigh sometimes. Sometimes he'd just do this randomly, but other times he'd do this and start talking to me, getting up real close to my face with really long and uncomfortable eye contact. I felt a little concerned, especially because he kept asking me about what I do in my free time and whether I liked boys and what me and my friends talk about. This isolated wouldn't seem too weird to me, but it was combined with everything else that made me feel really weirded out. He talked to me not like I was his friend's daughter, but like I was his friend. One time, I remember getting up to get some lemonade. All the adults were in a separate room, and he'd come right behind me and caress my back and ask more about my life with, again, really uncomfortable closeness and eye contact. Whenever I sat down, he'd make extra sure that he was near me. Another time, he just sat next to me and slung his arm over my shoulders and kept asking me stuff, which I awkwardly but very politely responded to. And while this was happening, he said, "I think I should spend more time with you, just you and me," with a horrible smile. That smile irked me so horribly, I felt like running. When we were leaving, he was the only adult who hugged me, and he hugged me for a long time. He specifically put his arms around my waist and gripped it really tightly, which I have been told is an extremely intimate way to hug, but I could be overblowing it. After he hugged me several times, he asked me when I could see him next, and how he really wanted to see me again. I told him I was unsure. Then, out of nowhere, he started helping my mom and dad with bringing their stuff to the car, which was extremely unnecessary since we only had a few bags, which we could definitely carry ourselves, but he didn't say anything. He continued getting touchy-feely with me until we made it to the car, where he insisted another hug, and I gave it to him. After which he said, "Please, come again sometime. Please." Really insistently, to which I said I would see if I could. To a normal person, he just seems like a really friendly and genuine guy, but I have a really bad gut feeling about him. The worst part is my dad witnessed most of this, but he said nothing. He continued like normal. I thought maybe at least after the party he'd blow up or tell me to never be alone with that guy ever, but he just said nothing, which makes me feel like I might be overreacting. I'm not sure. I need some assurance or maybe some clarity about what exactly this is. If he really does turn out to be a creep, it's absolutely sickening, because apparently he's known and held me as a baby, which is a disgusting thought in my mind. I don't know. Any thoughts? Update. Okay, so this got quite a bit of attention out of nowhere, but I just wanted to clear a few things. By the way, this was intended as a throwaway account, so if one day I accidentally go inactive, it's because I don't see a point to keeping the account any longer. Anyways, I'll be referring to my dad's friend as the creep, since I can firmly establish that he's creepy now. First, I just want to say thank you so much for the sweet, sweet comments, concern about my well-being, and wishing the best for me. It really means so much more than you guys could ever know, and I wholeheartedly appreciate the care that you guys put into the advice and comments that you've shared. You guys are awesome. Secondly, I want to address the amount of concern for me in these comments, because to a certain extent I feel like people think this event has traumatized me, and I would like to clarify, I am in absolutely no emotional or physical distress over this. Of course, this event disturbed me and made me want to avoid the creep, but I would never let my life be demolished over a man who's balding, not gonna lie. This isn't to shame or downgrade the experiences of people who have been traumatized by stuff like this or worse than this, because I have seen the terrible impact that it can have and how seriously it can mess you up. I guess I should have been more careful in my wording. It was uncomfortable, yes, but I was also mostly annoyed at it. It wasn't like I was scared, just felt awkward about it. It wasn't much better, but I'm not in as terrible of a state as you guys think I am. I just wanted everyone to know that I am doing fine. College applications and graduation stresses me out more and takes up more of my time and headspace than this event. So don't feel bad for me because my life is pretty good at the moment. I don't see the creep that much at all. Even when I do, it's in large public areas where friends and family are around, so I don't feel suffocated or controlled or helpless around him. And I guess I should have clarified this, but I did try to make attempts to shrug him off, and he did retreat back a lot of those times, only for him to do it again. Crazy. I feel like people think that I just let myself be a sitting duck, and it's my fault for that. I apologize. But I'll be more vocal with my discomfort next time. Thank you guys. And thirdly, to everyone telling me to inform my parents, which are basically all the comments, I appreciate the advice, and I know where you're coming from. people in this situation should tell their parents. But me telling my parents would probably do nothing. The thing with my parents is they are very, I guess you could say, emotionally unintelligent. They won't be able to understand what exactly or how exactly the creep's actions make me uncomfortable. I could try explaining, but that is a long and tedious process, and it could just lead to a big fight in the end with everyone hating each other. So I've decided against it unless I want a change in them, which I highly doubt is going to happen. But you guys are right. If not my parents, I should at least tell a trusted adult. I just need to figure out who, and you guys can be rest assured I will tell a trusted adult. Fourthly, everyone calling my dad out and saying he enabled the creep to do it. I know where you guys are coming from again, and I even agree with this to a certain level about why he didn't say a thing. Most fathers would freak out. Sadly though, my father is not most fathers. Not to say that he's an awful father, he's just not the best. As I said, my parents are very emotionally unintelligent. I'm not sure how both of them are this way, but it's the cards I've been dealt, and I have to sort of deal with it. So I'm pretty sure when my dad saw this happening, he misinterpreted the entire situation, or maybe he just didn't understand that this was highly inappropriate. However, my dad does get mad at stuff like this when he recognizes it. One time when another creep was sniffing and playing with my hair on a subway, I'm pretty sure that guy was not mentally sound. My dad pushed him and stomped on his foot pretty aggressively. My dad's a pretty big dude, so the guy got scared crapless. So I know he doesn't enable it, and I highly doubt that he'd let it slide just because the creep's a friend. They don't even talk to each other until they meet up, which is like once or twice a year. So I'm pretty sure of this theory of mine. I think he just didn't recognize a more subtle form of creepiness, or played it off because he thinks his friend wouldn't do that. A lot of people in the comments have shared this theory as well, and I highly agree with it knowing my dad. A second theory is coming from the fact that my dad is a very strict disciplinarian, and he did not want to cause a scene at the party or in front of me, because he doesn't want to seem as emotional or aggressive. He's had a complicated past of anger issues and is trying to learn how to control it. So I'm pretty sure he wouldn't want to lose his head, and in turn lose all of his progress of trying not to let the anger control him. But I'm pretty sure if he recognized what was wrong with it, he would have talked about it with my mom privately. I don't want to talk about it with my dad or mom, because I know they both don't know how to handle it or talk about it well. So it's better if they just figure their own crap out and just keep a secret of protection control, or whatever on me whenever this happens. As for why my mom said nothing, well, she wasn't around me for most of the night. She was busy talking with her friends, so I'm pretty sure that she didn't notice either. I know this may be a biased opinion from a young, naive teenage girl, but I think that this is probably likely. And fifth, I'm going to go to college next year, so I'm probably going to meet the creep like once again in the entire rest of my life, and I can protect myself pretty nicely, especially when there are people around. I will try to be more vocal about him trying to touch me or feel me now, whenever he does it, of course. Thank you guys for telling me that. I don't want to think about this night for the rest of my life like it was a scar on my psyche, because, in honest truth, regardless of the creep's weird behavior, I had a lot of fun with my siblings and cousins that night, and I don't want to taint that fun with whatever that guy has going on. I'm going to go to college pretty soon, and I want to be able to leave all this behind me. I want to be a new, better person with new friends and new experiences, but I still gotta have a little bit of the old with me. So I can honestly say life's got bigger plans for me than this, and I'm not gonna let it drag me down. Again, thank you all so much for the supportive comments and the sweet things you've said to encourage me. I appreciate it so much. More than you guys could ever know. And to everyone else, keep going. Sincerely. Have a lovely rest of your lives, because I'm pretty sure that after this, there's no real point in updating. If there is something really urgently relevant, then I might update. But until then, see you later. I I think someone tried to kidnap me a long time ago. I'm curious what you all think. When I was a teenager, I worked at this fast food restaurant in my hometown as my first job. And since it was connected to a gas station and open until 11 p.m. every night, I have a bunch of weird stories from working there. This one isn't the weirdest, but definitely the creepiest. For context, a few other teenage girls had gone missing at this time, and one of them had last been seen at my work. At the same time, I was learning about human trafficking in school, and actually how common it is in my hometown. One method of kidnapping victims that we were warned about was that present victims would try to recruit other victims, or lure them to another location where they will be kidnapped. I'm not sure how accurate this is. I don't remember the information as clearly now. So one night, I clocked out of work at 10:30 p.m. and walked to my car. I lock the doors as soon as I get in, and as I'm getting ready to back out of the parking space, a car pulls behind my vehicle blocking my exit, and a woman gets out of the passenger side and walks to my door. This woman starts yelling, asking for directions to a road that I've never heard of. I'm yelling back that I have no idea what road she's talking about, and she starts going on about "I can't hear you," and "Can you please just open your door?" Of course I don't, and then she eventually gets back in the car and they drive out of the parking lot. This was so odd, especially as an adult now looking back on it, because why would an adult woman think it's okay to go up to a young girl and ask for directions in the middle of the night? You have to know that that would be inappropriate and scary to do so, right? And also, the gas station and drive-thru were both open. Why not just go in there and ask for directions? Especially after they couldn't hear me. Why leave the lot and not go ask for directions from someone else? I don't know. I think about this every so often and wonder what was really going on. What do you guys think was happening? Maybe I just watched too much true crime. I don't know.
Hello everyone, my name is Minister K. I'm a non-denominational preacher here in Alabama. I haven't always been a man of God though. I've had my share of ups and downs, as life is merely a learning experience where we are all forced to make mistakes in order to learn and achieve our God-given potential. Life is one big fight. Life is filled with many battles. One of my many battles took place in August of 2016, a battle that quite frankly would change my life forever. When I was young, I lost both of my parents tragically. My mother died in a house fire, and my father of a heart attack. This caused me to be very rebellious at a young age. I'm not sure if many of you can relate, but growing up without parents will cause a child to be forced to stay in some pretty sketchy places, surrounded by some pretty sketchy people. It's almost as if these types of individuals take advantage of the fact that you don't have a guardian to protect you, and the world is filled with real monsters who prey on the innocence of children, as well as children whose parents have failed to protect them, so to speak. As far as myself, I was forced to experience what I can only describe as a living hell, and had been inflicted with a deep-rooted trauma, some of which I carry still to this day. Anyways, I was 25 years old at the time of this story. I did not have any support at all and began using drugs in order to cope with my trauma and to support my addiction and lifestyle. Honestly, at the time, I was a tattoo artist. When you deal with tattoo customers, the majority of them are in the criminal underworld. Criminals just love tattoos. Bikers, gangsters, you get the idea. I was, however, smoking marijuana though, and some of my customers were weed dealers. I would trade in tattoos for weed, sometimes half a pound or more at a time. I would smoke on it for a couple of months, and when I ran out, I would do the same thing. Call the dealer and ask if he was ready to trade for some ink. I couldn't eat the weed, so sometimes I would get rid of some to my close friends. It just so happens that my close friends were the ones to take away my freedom. One evening, they came over to hang out. We smoked a bunch of weed and we talked as usual. I noticed that they were on edge, and when I asked them what was wrong, they told me that they were having personal problems at home. I had no reason to suspect them of anything else. We had been friends for over 2 years at this time. Sometime during that evening, they asked me if I would sell them a 20-sack. I was a tattoo artist and piercing professional at the time, and at this time I was making great money swinging in, and I had no reason to deal drugs. But I've always been a really good friend, and I have a good heart, and in this particular case, it would be my downfall big time. At the time, I did not realize the length that some departments go through in order to catch a person selling drugs. They'll send multiple confidential informants to purchase from you. They use the dirtiest tactics imaginable. They even provide the cash to the informants and wire them up with hidden cameras and devices, stashed in stuff like ink pens, hats. I've seen cameras on the buttons of a shirt even. This particular day, I was out of marijuana. I wanted to smoke and I was going to get a sack anyway. 2 friends of mine came over and asked me if I wanted to smoke with them and if I could get some weed. So I called up our weed man. The weed man pulled up and I went outside. I purchased 2 $20 bags of weed from them, and I came back inside where these 2 friends of mine were waiting. I put the weed on the table and asked them to pick whichever one they wanted. My friend put the weed in her pocket and went straight towards the door. She was acting so strange. I told her to wait. We could smoke my bag of weed for free. But she was in so much of a hurry that she turned it down. And I knew that was strange, because nobody's gonna turn down free weed. Nobody. I didn't recognize the vehicle they came to my house in. It was all just wrong. I didn't recognize all of these signs at the time, because you don't suspect someone that you've been loyal to betray you so savagely. This caused the narcotics squad to have enough as evidence to form a secret indictment and warrant an arrest. I went to jail on a secret indictment for selling weed. 2 days after they left my house, about 15 vehicles pulled up in the front yard, and about 25 narcotics squad officers and the sheriff's department proceeded to kick my doors in. All of them were carrying automatic AR-style machine guns, bulletproof vests, the works. They put my elderly uncle on his face with a gun and began to tear our house to pieces as I sat in the back of a cop car and watched them proceed with the search warrant. In Alabama, on a secret indictment charge, they'll give you one chance to turn 3 other dealers that you know personally over to them on indictments, and they will dismiss your case. Because I refused, they had the judge and the district attorney place a bond hold on me during the entirety of my case, which was almost 2 years. This means that I was being held without bond. While I was there, my cellmate was a known serial killer. He was responsible for the death of at least 17 people that they knew about. His name was Wilmore Wiggins from Camden, Alabama. Although he was responsible for at least 17 murders, they only had enough evidence on one of the murders to actually prove it. This man had been terrorizing our community for years. I mean years. He was a voodoo practitioner, as were the rest of his family members. One night after lockdown, I was just staring at the roof of my bunk. He was on the top bunk and I was on the bottom. We had already been locked down for a few hours. It was so quiet that you could hear the building settling if you listened intently. In jail, you have nothing but time to think about life, about the direction of your life, about life in general. I was doing just that one night. I did not realize that he was still awake. Through the deafening silence, I heard a voice ask the question, "Hey Big," which is what they called me, by the way. "You ever killed anybody?" I didn't even have to think about it and responded immediately, "Never." He asked me if I ever thought about killing anyone. I responded, "No sir, never." That is when he began confessing to one of the many murders that he had committed. One here in my hometown that he was never even charged with. A murder that took place that is now a cold case. A murder that's never been solved. First off, as I said before, he practiced voodoo, so he began to describe in detail how he got away with his 17 murders. As I began to squint through the darkness of the cell, I noticed in the mirror above the sink that he was now sitting up on his bed. He was looking for someone to talk to in order to release his burden. I was more than happy to listen, as I'm not only into true crime, but also I have always been an understanding person. I'm also a really good listener, and this was something that was very intriguing to me at the moment. It even kind of resembled a horror story or something like a scary movie. It had me on the edge of my bunk. I couldn't move a muscle as I listened with the fullest of intent. Anyways, as I sat there listening, he told me that his voodoo allowed him to get away with the crimes. He said that if you want to get away with murder, you should plant a rose bush in front of your house. He said you can go and get a piece of that person's hair, the person you wish to harm, and bury it at the foot of that rose bush. When you take a piece of sewing thread, and he would tie it and run the thread from the stem of one of the roses and tie it to the doorknob of his home, which was about 15 to 20 feet away. He told me that as long as the thread is in place, he could go out and commit any murder or crime that he wanted, and there would be no retribution. He told me that there was an entity named Zombie. This entity would come inside of him and possess him, giving him supernatural knowledge, wisdom, and insight in order to conceal evidence after his murders. Personally, I am an ordained minister now, and I can tell you from experience that not only can God supernaturally empower a person, but also Satan can as well. The consequences for this is a price that nobody would want to pay. The ones that do, I'm sure, regret it surely eventually. Anyways, he told me that as long as that thread is in place, the spell remains. He told me that he did this every single time he killed somebody, and he got away with over 16 murders. I cannot tell you as a matter of fact whether this voodoo thing is real or not. All I can tell you that is factual is that he 100% believed in it to his soul. My community was terrorized by this man for years and years. Everybody in my town literally knew this man was a serial killer, but they could never prove it. He was just so manipulative and cunning and clever, and had the uncanny ability to be able to manipulate evidence to his advantage in order to conceal his crimes. He told me that one in particular that he knew was in the bar room with his girlfriend. After he went to use the bathroom, talking to his girlfriend, and it infuriated him. After knowing this man for 2 years, I can tell you from experience that he's not the type to fight a man, but he would beat women, and he was very abusive to them mentally and spiritually, as well as physically. He also had a knife on him at all times while he was in jail. He would not fistfight a man. However, he would not hesitate for even one single moment to stab you to death if you crossed him. Anyways, he told me that whenever he saw this particular man talking to his woman in a bar, he got enraged, but he did not do anything about it immediately. He waited an entire month until he had the perfect opportunity to exact revenge on this person. During the course of this time, he had a girl from the neighborhood get a piece of his hair from the pillow and deliver it to him for $20. One night, he got the perfect opportunity. The opportunity that he had been waiting so patiently for. He told me that he was riding around one night, exactly about a month after the incident. He was riding around town after leaving the bar, and he saw that man walking home. He said that it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, so he pulled over and asked the man if he needed a ride. The man was cautious at first, he told me, but he agreed to accept the ride. He got inside of the vehicle and said hello. Then he asked Wilmore, the killer, if he was mad at him for talking to his girlfriend, because he heard from the girlfriend that Wilmore wanted to hurt him. Wilmore assured him that everything was okay, and that he did not take it personal. Anyways, he asked him if he would take him to get some whiskey. The man said sure, so Wilmore went and bought a big bottle of whiskey, and they proceeded to ride around on dirt roads out there in the country getting drunk. That man drank and drank and drank. They played the radio and had a great time. Except, Wilmore was only pretending to drink. He proceeded to get the man drunker and drunker until he couldn't walk. That's when he pulled over in the country and told the man that he needed to urinate. The man said that he had to as well. So when the man got out of the vehicle, Wilmore grabbed a 2x4 out of the back seat, crept up behind the man, and bashed his skull with it. As he's explaining this to me, all I can do is listen in horror. I cannot believe my ears. This man is confessing a whole homicide to me in the most intimate detail. I got chills all over my body. I could not believe that I was listening to something that too much resembled to be something like a horror movie to me. He told me that he hit the man so hard that the board had knocked him out instantly. Then he told me he bashed the man's head at least 25 times after he was dead. He threw the board in the trunk of his vehicle and grabbed a hammer and proceeded to bust this man's teeth out of his head, one by one with the hammer. Then he shaved all of the man's hair off of his head, including his beard and eyebrows, and put it in a bag. Then he reached down and grabbed the man by the legs and drug him off into a cow pasture in the middle of the country and left him there. I was in shock, utter disbelief. I almost didn't even feel real. I felt like I was in a dream hearing this, but I listened intently. People will tell you everything you want to know about them plus more if you could only just close your mouth and open your ears. Most people do not have this ability, but it is a gift that I have been given. In this current situation, it seemed to be a curse though. Anyways, this man's family was looking for him. I was a tattoo artist at the time this happened. I remember it. I was really good friends with the brother of the man who was killed. He used to come and get tattoos from me, and he would cry because they could not find his brother anywhere. They looked for this man for months, but to no avail. Here's the craziest part of all. One night, my friend's mother had a dream. God came to her in a dream and told her where to find her son. Like I said, their family literally had search parties with hundreds of people looking for this man and could not find him anywhere. Anyways, my friend's mom said that God came to her in this dream and told her that her son was in the back of a cow pasture in Possum Bend, way out in the middle of nowhere. She got out of a dead sleep, called her entire family and told them to be waiting outside. She drove by their houses one by one and picked them up in a minivan and drove them out to the exact location that God showed her in the dream. He was right there at the tree in the back pasture, almost nothing left to his remains. When I say that he beat this man's skull flat, it's an understatement. As I said before, I was truly disturbed when I heard this. It still haunts me at night, even today. He told me about a few other murders that he did that he never got caught for. They are truly disturbing. His final victim, a woman and her baby, were burned alive in a trailer. That's not the disturbing part, though. The woman had been dead a week before she was set on fire, and he actually positioned her sitting upright in his car with a seatbelt on as he drove around so they could be seen together as if she was still alive. He was a master at manipulation and confusing times, dates, and locations of the murders that he committed. He was also an expert at manipulating evidence and disposing of it perfectly in order to conceal his crimes. I spent hundreds of hours alone in a dark cell with this creepy psychopath. I'd love to share the details if anyone is interested in listening. He is still alive and in prison somewhere here in Alabama. He was actually given life without parole after being held in the same jail that I was in for almost 4 years. I have most interesting experiences to share. During the daytime, we would be released from the cell to move freely throughout the day room, watching TV and taking showers. But at 8 p.m. each night, they would lock both of us in a 2-man cell and the door would not be reopened until 8 a.m. During this time, we had a lot of free time to talk, and it was always dark in the cell at night. The details of some of the crimes he committed are so disturbing that I still take sleeping medication and am currently still seeking psychological help to this very day. It was 1 a.m., and I just got back from the bathroom ready to go back to bed. When I got in my bed, I looked at the window and saw a tall white figure outside. I got out of my bed to see, and I had blurry vision, so I couldn't tell if it was a sign or a human. Because it was so dark outside, the only thing I saw was the white. I decided to go back to bed, and it was still there, and it didn't move. Suddenly, I saw red flashing and didn't want to look at it. After a while, I just kept thinking it was just a pole, and I just closed my eyes. The next day, I look out the window to see the white figure gone. There was no pole or sign. It was just gone. I still remember this day pretty vividly. I was around 14 to 15 years old, and my parents had just gotten invited to a wedding. The wedding took place on a sort of castle located on a waterfront. Anyways, we took a boat to the location, and until then everything seemed normal. I was playing with some other kids at the wedding, and we decided to roam around the surrounding areas of the castle. We did this for hours and everything seemed normal. Except for some random drunk women had tried to throw a stone at us, but we brushed it off thinking nothing of it. Later on in the night to the end of the wedding, there was a little celebration where everyone would release a small hot air balloon and let it go into the night sky. All kids, including me, decided to follow these hot air balloons as they lifted off. However, in order to follow, we had to traverse a forest. We all continued running into the forest, and that's where I and 4 more people saw it. As we were sprinting into the forest, we saw a woman sitting down wrapped in a blanket, surrounded by 6 to 8 men with flashlights. As these men heard our footsteps, they flashed their light into our direction, but did not say anything. Complete silence. I stood still. It seemed like they felt like they just got caught doing something and didn't know how to react. I ran away as fast as I could, and the others did the same. Nobody followed us. Nobody ever said anything about this. I was invited to a huge family reunion in Florida, and weirdly enough, we were supposed to wear name tags to identify ourselves, but I went with it. There was going to be a lot of distant cousins, and the idea was to wear name tags to make it easier for everyone to know who's who. I stopped at a grocery store to pick up some ice cream for the reunion. I was sitting in my car checking my texts for a moment, when I noticed suddenly that it looked like someone was blocking the sun. I looked up, and might as well have jumped out of my skin due to the shock. A man in his 50s or 60s was putting his tongue on my windshield. While I'm not sure how he was able to see my name tag, he grinned and asked, "Is your name my name?" I didn't really answer. I just nodded and quickly thought of something to say. I said I was just leaving. Then he asked me where I was going, so I said I'm going to a different store because they didn't have the ice cream that I was looking for. He said okay and then just walked away. As stupid as this sounds, I decided to drive away and go to a different store nearby because my nerves were rattled. I honestly think what happened was pretty funny in hindsight, but I felt terrible when it was actually happening. my first post ever, so I apologize for any misspelling or confusion in my story. I don't know if this will bring me any peace of mind, but I definitely need to get it off my chest. I had plans to meet up with family after they got off of work, and I didn't want to be pent up in the house until then, so I went to a Ross that was halfway between our meetup spot. I'd rather not give out my actual location. I started off in the men's athletic section to look for things for my husband, and then went to the women's section. As I walked over to the t-shirt rack, I had a lady, late 20s, early 30s, come up to me and ask if I would participate in a survey she was doing about joy. I was skeptical, but I agreed. About halfway through, I noticed she never bothered to write anything down or attempt to record anything I was telling her. The questions revolved around faith, and if I believed in God or if I would want to work more on my belief in Him. I tried to keep things as short and simple as possible, without giving too much information about myself to a stranger. She ended up thanking me for my time, and then walked away. I want to note that she had nothing in her hands, so she wasn't doing any type of shopping. Plus, doing a survey like that in the middle of a store seems a little off. Once I kinda came to my senses, I tried walking around the store to see if I could find her. As I'm walking around, I took notice of a super tall man just staring at the shoes for men. He wasn't picking anything up, literally just staring. He's a notable character. I ended up seeing her in the dress aisle, so I rushed over to the register to pay for what I had. I did notice while I was in line she was talking to another woman, and the taller man walked over to the worker wearing the loss prevention vest, asked something, and then went to the back of the store. When I got up to the register, I let that lady know of my encounter, and she asked me to describe the lady I came in contact with. She told me she'd let someone know about it, and thanked me. Literally, as I walk out the door, that same tall man walked out with me. No bags or anything in his hands. I immediately turned back around and walked right back into the store. I again shared my story to the loss prevention worker and asked if he or someone could walk me to my car. I don't think he's allowed to leave that spot because he told me I'd have to wait for someone. Thankfully, another worker walked in, and he asked her if she was early for her shift, to which she said yes. She ended up walking me to my car, and I told her my same story. She watched me get in my car, and I immediately locked the doors behind me and took off. I drove for about approximately 10 minutes, went into a random neighborhood, and thankfully no one was following behind me. All of this could have definitely been nothing, and just myself overthinking it. But with the way the world is, I sadly didn't want to take any chances. I am a 19-year-old female, and I was out to eat with my boyfriend, and the place we were eating at has a live show right next door. We decided to listen outside to some of the bands playing once we were done eating. It was around 9 p.m. at this time. Shortly after going outside, this girl comes up to me and starts talking to me about all kinds of things. She has bright red hair, many piercings and tattoos. The first thing she did was compliment what we were wearing. I wasn't wearing anything special, just a plain pink dress with Crocs. She seemed very friendly and continued on a conversation with us. Mainly me, though. I figured it's because I have piercings and a tattoo. Maybe that's why. I also kind of chalked it up to her being drunk or just overly friendly. Eventually, she asked me a weird question that I didn't really understand and can't recall. Something along the lines of, "What's your purpose here?" or something like that. I just remember not understanding what she was asking me, and just telling her where I worked because it sounded like that's what she was asking me. She said she works in the strip club, in the same town, and to come visit. She left abruptly after, while texting on her phone, and went over to this guy. Me and my boyfriend went to leave. I thought nothing of it, and we passed by them. After turning the corner, my boyfriend told me to check and see if I was being followed. I looked behind my shoulder and didn't see anybody. I walked a little further and looked back again, and there was the guy. He was walking extremely quick and caught up pretty fast. He followed me all the way to my car, which was at least a mile away, until we got in and locked the doors. He was just a couple of feet from my car before he turned around. My boyfriend told me to start the car as soon as possible, and once we left, he told me that he passed by them. He heard the girl say to the guy something along the lines of, "She's a little nervous, but," and he had a bad vibe that I was being sex trafficked, or they were going to try to pimp me out. Maybe snatch me up, I don't know. It wouldn't have been very hard for them to do. He was easily at least double my weight, as I'm only 100 pounds. He was following with a lot of speed, and I mean really, what was the motive? Sorry if this has been long, but I'm just a little creeped out.
Before I got my car in my freshman year of college, I would use Lyft to get to work pretty much every day during the summer. During the winter, fall, I just walked even at night. And in all those Lyft cars and drivers, I never had any noticeable encounters. I've probably been in a couple hundred by now, and aside from the occasional political opinion and speeder, it was all fine. One day I order a Lyft car like normal. It'll be here in 7 minutes. Cool. I walks outside a couple minutes early to go and wait for my driver, and I see a vehicle that pretty much matches the description of mine sitting in my driveway. You know, that little car icon next to the profile that you can use to compare the real one? It was the same color, the same size, and unless you noticed the little details, it pretty much looked the same. But my driver was still 2 minutes away. I choose to ignore him, thinking it's just a funny coincidence, and maybe he's a friend of a neighbor or something. But then he rolls down his window and looks at me, so I go up to talk to him. Maybe he's just lost? And by the way, a different race entirely from my actual driver, so I know for sure this isn't him. But similar skin tones and age. He tells me that he's my driver and pulls out his phone that has my profile like how your driver has, to make sure it's you. So in my naive and innocent teenage mind, I think to myself, oh, Lyft must have accidentally sent me 2 drivers, and tell him that he's not the driver I was told I would meet. Right as we were talking, my actual driver pulled up and rolled down his window. I explained the situation and said, I'll probably get in the first guy's car, because he was here first. Then my actual driver says that I should probably go with whoever is on my phone. That sounded pretty logical to me and made sense. But before I could turn around and tell the other guy I was going to go ahead and pick the other guy, he drove off. Tinted windows, by the way. It wasn't until I got into the car that my driver brought it to my attention how weird that was. He told me in his 10 years of being a Lyft driver, nothing like that has ever happened to him or anyone he knew. Then it suddenly dawned on me about what might have just happened. The similar car appearance to my actual driver. The fact that he had my info, but I didn't have his. The fact that he was there a couple minutes early, so if I did get in, it wouldn't have intercepted my real driver. Everything. And I almost got into his car. Went to work and I was totally shaken up. I tried making a report to Lyft, but without any evidence or information other than a basic physical description, there wasn't much I could do. My Lyft driver said he would go ahead and tell the story to some other driver friends on a social media forum, Facebook probably, so they can spread the word. So that makes me feel a little better. That driver might have saved my life. I think about that a lot. And hey, my dad heard about it and got me a car, so at least I got something other than trauma. Edit. I've also only told a couple people in real life due to the traumatic and scary nature of the whole thing. Looking back on it now, it was most likely a trafficker, kidnapper. These guys probably have access to Lyft's servers and look for repeating customers like me. I've since deleted the app and my account. Always check the license plates. I went to a 7-Eleven in Hawaii
and this weird guy was trying to full-blown have a conversation out of nowhere. I was clearly about to enter the store, and yet he was like, "Hey you," and I turned around. He was just trying to say something, but I told him I had to go. When I was in the store, I had bad vibes like he was looking at my car that I arrived in, so I kept my eyes looking out the store. I felt like I looked weird at this point, to be honest. When leaving, he tried to talk to me again. He said, "Hey, you got a lighter?" Because I clearly had one. At this point, I was getting angry that he wouldn't just leave me alone. I say no, then ignore him, and go to put my key in the door. Then he starts walking up to me from behind, so I turn around and give him a mean look and say, "Yeah, you need something?" Then he started talking about my car stickers, and I was like, "Yeah, I have stickers." Then he kept trying to say something, and I just stared at him without saying a word. Then he got the message and walked back. He made me feel like he was trying to get something out of me. Cigarettes, lighters, money, something like that for free. He didn't look homeless, but my gut said that he's probably on drugs and really wants me to give him anything, something, or possibly harm me. This was back in January early this year. My friend and I had just started working on our film project, and were getting ideas of locations to shoot the film. We drove to a swinging bridge about an hour away from our hometown. It was your usual, unsturdy bridge that was about 400 feet long and 60 feet above water. This bridge was only meant for walking, no running, biking, etc. Across it, it was parallel to another bridge, one made for vehicles. My friend and I got a couple shots of the bridge itself before we made our way to the other side, where there were train tracks in a neighborhood. About halfway across the bridge, we heard yelling coming from the other one. We looked, and it appeared to be a lady waving her arms like she was trying to get our attention. She called out a name what I thought was Hayden or Aiden, which both of those were neither mine or my friend's name. We yelled back, "We're not them," thinking that would be the end of the conversation. The woman just stood there, staring at us. We tried to shrug it off as we thought it had been settled, but then the woman takes off full speed running across the bridge, in the same direction we were going. We thought it was a strange, but we just laughed it off and carried on. We made it to the other side of the bridge and began shooting footage near the train tracks. I know it's unsafe, but this was a regular crossing point for the bridge trail. While in the middle of a scene, I heard a familiar voice yell from behind me. It was the same woman yelling the same thing. She stood on top of the hill of that neighborhood, across the tracks. Again, we yelled back that we don't her, and we're not who she thinks we are. This woman takes off running once again, but this time towards us. This frightened us because why would this woman need to get to us that bad? My friend and I quickly grabbed our things and headed for the swinging bridge. Even knowing we weren't supposed to run across, we walked super fast, which made the bridge sway. It's like our fight or flight kicked in. The lady had caught up to the start of the bridge by the time we made it halfway across, still yelling, but this time it was in a hatful voice. This was when I turned around to look once to see how far the distance between us was. The lady had stopped there at the start of the bridge, and I noticed she was holding something behind her back. Even though she had stopped running after us, we continued to bolt across the bridge. We turned back once we reached the other side to see the woman still standing there, fiddling with something in her hands. My friend pulled out her phone and began recording the woman. This made her turn back immediately and walk the other way. We never found out why she chased us or what she was holding in her hand. Sometimes I think back and wonder if maybe she needed help. But why not scream for help? I just find it strange that after we told her multiple times that we weren't the people she thought we were, and she still followed us. I had difficulty sleeping about a week after this incident, as I couldn't get the idea out of my head of what this woman wanted to do with us. I had never been so scared in my entire life. So I took the bus as usual to get home, and this guy sitting next to me gets off at the same bus stop. I know pretty much the entire neighborhood, and I don't think I ever saw anyone of his nationality. During the way home, I was at the phone speaking another language. So this guy, after we get down from the bus, makes a sound to get my attention and asks me where I'm from. I should have just walked away, but in this situation I get scared and don't act rationally. So I answer him. Then he asks me where I live, and I tell him where I live without pointing to my house. Then he proceeds to ask me if he can get with me to do something, which he says in another language. At that point, I start to laugh hysterically and keep telling him I have a boyfriend. I know I should have just threatened him to call the police or something, but I got scared and kinda didn't want him to turn violent for not telling him what he wanted to hear. Then I try to leave, but he followed me. Then I stop to confront him, and he wants to give me a hug and say that I'm so beautiful. I keep replying that I can't, to which then he offers me to shake hands, which I nervously agree just to get out of the situation. Then I change paths in hopes that he wouldn't watch me, go home, or return back after. Should I learn how to stop acting like a total idiot in these situations? Yes. Should I be concerned that he will begin to stalk me? I don't know. This happened a couple of years ago, but I often think about it and what this person's intentions were. Disclaimer, it isn't the most exciting story. So a couple of years ago, probably 2018, me, a 23-year-old male, I'm outside of my mother's house close to midnight. It's dark in a neighborhood, no one outside, and it's quiet and chill. I'm smoking a joint by my car, just listening to music and vibing quietly. I see a person walking up the street towards me. Nothing to be alarmed about. She gets close. She's a cute mid-30s woman. Sees me smoking and asks if I have a cigarette. She was friendly. I say no, but we have a nice quick chat. Plus, every young man has fantasies of cute women walking towards them. You never know. But definitely just a fantasy and wishful thinking. I wasn't going to that route. So, during our quick chat, probably only a minute or so in, she says, "One moment, let me make this call." So she calls her husband. I don't recall how I knew it was her husband, but I believe she mentioned him in our chat. This is an older memory. This is what creeped me out. She says on the phone, "Hi, honey. OMG, I think I found the one." She was excited about it, but in a weird way. Hard to explain, but it sounded sinister. It creeped me out and gave me red flags. Plus I'm thinking, found what? I already said I didn't have a cigarette. Plus, she is walking around the streets. She and her husband are looking for something. What does that even mean? So, while she was still on the phone, I just turned around, went inside, and locked the door. I don't know what to think of it to this day. What could she have meant? Best case, she wanted a three-way with her husband, which I'm not into. Worst case, they were gonna rob me or do something awful and weird. What do you think her deal was? So I work at a bar that has a back alley that leads to a small secluded parking lot. There are several large trash cans and many small ones, and there are some addicts, homeless folks, etc., who will come to the alley pretty often. Usually they're pretty harmless and just look through the trash or ask for $1. But sometimes they aren't. Tonight was one of those times. I went out the back to throw out a bag of trash when I noticed a man walking quickly by the farthest group of garbage cans from the back door, which also happens to be the house, the one that I use. He looked in my direction. I don't think he knew I could see him. And then, as he saw me walking toward him and the trash can, He quickly and quietly hid himself in the dark behind the trash cans. I didn't see where he ended up, but it scared me so much. I was the only one around, and I knew he was hiding because I would have seen him walk past if not. It was the only way to go. I left my bag of trash right where it was and immediately walked back inside. I hope he left soon after I went back in. Yesterday, after leaving the public restroom, a man who had exited the men's room started to follow me. He called out, "Hey," but I didn't respond as it seemed flirtatious. He came closer and asked, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" Repeating this a few times, I finally said, "Leave me alone." Then he shockingly asked, "Should I kidnap you?" Thankfully, I was headed towards a crowded area. The people around me seemed concerned, which I believe made him back off. It's infuriating to deal with such comments. Approaching someone is one thing, but not stopping when I show no interest and then threatening to kidnap me is a whole new level of entitlement. I'm a 24-year-old female, and I moved into my first apartment by myself. I usually have roommates, but my last situation, I was harassed by two guys in my house, and also by a 60-year-old woman who was a severe alcoholic and drug addict. Long story. I've been here for 2 months, and it's been good. I love the place, the apartment, the location. But yesterday, I got the crap scared out of me when I received a knock on my door at 3 a.m. I live on the top floor of a 25-floor building and was the first to move in after renovations. So, there's only 4 to 5 people on my whole floor. I had no texts, no calls from anyone that I knew about coming over. First they knocked. I was silent. They knocked again. It sounded like a man knocking. I called my mom, telling her this situation and that I was utterly terrified being a young woman. They waited a few minutes and knocked again. My mom called the police for me, and 2 women officers came up. I told them what happened, and they were super kind about the situation. The only person who I could have maybe expected to knock, the only person who had access, was the doorman. This doorman in particular has always had a strange vibe. He never talked much, but he was always watching me. I'd go to the elevators and he'd get out of his chair to stare at me, waiting for them to open. He is a 28 to 32-year-old dude. I'm not sure exactly how old. And he's a pretty tall African-American man. He'd always check me out, and while he wouldn't say much, he'd flirt. 2 days ago, I was going out with some girlfriends, and I was dressed in a tight and short black dress with black boots. He seemed really interested in me at that point, and definitely spent some extra time staring at me. I don't really think much of it. So after talking to the police, I went downstairs and asked him, "Hey, so I got a knock on my door at 3 in the morning. Was that you by chance?" And he immediately said, "Yeah, it was." I was like, why were you knocking on my door at 3 a.m.? And he says, "Well, it wasn't 3 a.m. It was more like 2:30. I was just checking up on you." I said, "Why?" And he mumbled something under his breath. I'm like, "What did you say?" He said, "I don't know." I gave him leeway and I said, "Because you thought I wasn't okay?" And he says, yeah. And I said, "Why wouldn't you think I was okay?" Again, he said, "I don't know." I told him that it really scared me. I also said, "I see you 3 to 4 times a day. Why couldn't you just talk to me down here?" I don't know. Looking back, I also received a knock on my door at 12:30 a.m., but it was very faint. Enough where I thought he was knocking on someone else's door. So weird. After I told him not to knock on my door again, he called me and left a voicemail on my phone. I noticed the random number and realized that he'd called me at midnight and at 3 a.m. I'm super scared because I live alone. Ring doorbells aren't allowed in the building unless requested, and also the management company keeps hiring guys like this. The last guy was fired. I'd ideally like to actually end my lease, even if he gets fired, which he definitely will considering the last guy who wasn't nearly as bad got fired. That would be good. But he now knows where I live, what car I drive, when I come and go, and also has access to the magnets to get up the elevator. He even asked me a few days ago, "What's your unit number?" so we could come up. Almost like it was premeditated. I'm super scared and hear stories about this all the time. I'm terrified that he'll have a maintenance key or something, come into my apartment and hide and wait for me to get home. A young girl was just killed by someone who worked in her building. What do you think I should do? I wasn't sure which sub to post this to, but since it's not exactly my story, even though I was involved, I'm posting it here. Yesterday, I celebrated my birthday. I invited my ex-girlfriend Emma because we're actually still really close friends. She took the train to get me, which takes about 1.5 hours and requires changing trains twice. She left around midnight and should have been home around 1:30 to 1:45 a.m. Shortly after 1 a.m., she texted me about a weird dude following her after striking up an unsettling conversation with Emma about whether she was homosexual. And then she answered truthfully that no, she's just trans, hoping he would go away if she was friendly enough. He went on about why she was trans even though she knew it was satanic. He also told her that he'd already noticed her on the train that same morning, which just strikes me as especially creepy. She got off at a stop, intending to wait for her subway home, but he got off with her and wouldn't leave her alone. The next subway to her place wouldn't come for another 25 minutes, and the stop was deserted. She sent me multiple anxious voice messages until she eventually called me, borderline crying and panicking, saying she had to run away from the station and was now lost with little idea of where she was, even less of an idea of how to get home, and her phone was only on 8% battery. She didn't have any money to call a cab either. She couldn't go back to the station because this guy was presumably still there, and he had followed her when she had tried to just take the next train in the direction that she had come from, in an attempt to try and get away from him. I advised her to call the police, which she did. They apparently came, took her statement, and left again, leaving her there on the outskirts of a big city with still no idea how to get home. I told her to use Google Maps to try and get home and try to save battery, but to update me periodically. She called me again a few minutes after, saying that she was 45 minutes away on foot from her home, but that thankfully she had managed to reach her mother, and she was coming to pick up Emma from where she was. I stayed on the line with Emma until her mom got there. I'm so angry. Emma already struggles with severe anxiety and agoraphobia. The fact that she managed to make it to my birthday party was an achievement for her. This isn't going to help at all. Why do people like this even exist? I'm a 24-year-old guy, and I'm not great at writing things out like this, but I just wanted some advice as I'm a socially awkward person. So I decided to go into town the other day and took the train in. I arrived at the station, got my ticket, then waited for the train. I was approached by a man in, let's say, his 60s. I must have been someone that he knew or seen before, because he said, "Wow, I haven't seen you in some time." I replied, "Sorry, I think you may have the wrong person." He continued to push the conversation by saying, "Oh, you must have a twin." I laughed and brushed it off. Once the train arrived, I got on and sat down. I sat down in a two-seater chair. The man sat down next to me and asked me my name. Trying to be nice, I replied my name and he said his name. He asked me a few questions and I gave answers. All up to this point is found fine. He asked to use my phone to make a call, which I didn't see an issue with. After this, he sent a text message which was fine. His own phone beeped. He then turned to me and said, "I have your number now. We can catch up later." He had called himself on my phone to get my number. I tried to play it off coolly, but I was pretty creeped out, and I couldn't leave since he had blocked me in. He finally got off at his station. Straight away, he texted me, and each day he has been texting me to come over to his house, or to go out with him for coffee. I felt bad for him because he seemed lonely, but it just feels really odd and creepy. I just wanted some people's thoughts, as I've never been in this situation before, and don't really have friends to talk to about this. Edit. I really appreciate the comments and responses to my boast. I have blocked him after a small exchange. I was trying to be nice, then I tried to ignore him, but he became really aggressive and called me and became verbally aggressive as well. I will be reporting this to the police and changing my number. Thank you for making me feel justified in my response. Transportation in the Philippines were made easier because there are motorcycle taxis here, and they are much cheaper compared to Uber or Grab cars. You just need to book a rider through an app, just like how you would book Uber in your country. I'm used to taking them whenever it's not raining, and it's a faster way to get to my workplace, but that is just the tip of the iceberg to my story. One particular night, I was craving for something to eat. It was around 1 o'clock a.m. It took me an hour or two of scrolling through my phone to look for food to satisfy my cravings, when I decided to just go to 7-Eleven, which is just a few blocks away from the village that I live in. I decided to just walk. The evening breeze was nice. I reached the highway and I walked to the nearest pedestrian lane. The streets were a bit dim, when suddenly a man on the motorcycle stopped by me, and he was urging me to ride on his motorcycle. Motorcycle taxis here have uniforms, and I know that he is a phony. 7-Eleven was still 2 blocks away. I politely brushed him off and said that I want to walk. He took off, and I felt a rush of relief. I enjoyed the rest of my walk. When I came to this block, where only one street lamp was working, and the light from it was not a big help, my heart suddenly beat fast and I was sweating. Mind you, it was cold during that time. Something is stopping me from taking a step further. My legs felt heavy, but I did my best to walk because I was really hungry during that time. I don't have perfect vision. I can't see anything that is more than 4 feet away from me. When I was about to reach the corner where the only working street lamp was standing, it was the guy from earlier, and he was smoking something. I squinted my eyes and he was smoking crack. I walked faster until I reached 7-Eleven. I shopped for my food, and when I went to the cashier to pay for my stuff, there were 3 people ahead of me. He went behind me, and he was holding a roll of aluminum foil. I was shaking and I was about to cry, when suddenly my childhood friend who was a police officer came in and he greeted me. I greeted him back. My friend offered me a ride because he had just clocked out and told me to wait for him. He went to the drinks section of the store, and the guy whispered in my ear, "Suerte mo miss, hindi kiti, marape ngayon," which translates to, "You're lucky, miss, that I can't R-word you right now." I genuinely am so scared. There's this car that has been following me for the past couple of months. I've seen him in 5 different areas about 25 minutes away from each other. He lives in my area, and he smiles at me creepily, and I just see him everywhere. I was hanging out with my friend today, and he pulled out the corner and looked at me, and then stopped across the road from me at a food place. And when he saw me walk out of a path, he immediately started pulling up and stopped practically right in front of me. And then I ran and hid. I'm very scared, and I don't know what to do. I saw these 2 guys kind of checking out the street, or a gathering in a neighboring house. Then they moved to our car parked outside our house on our parking lot. Then they were filming, recording, and using some sort of an app below our car. What could this possibly be? One of them sat down, and while the other did this, and minutes later they ran. But they came back again and were seen on the yard of my neighbor's patio across the street. Plus, I saw this while it was happening. They definitely seemed suspicious. Then again, one of them snuck back to do the same thing under our car. Camera footage has it all. But what could this be? I traveled to Seoul for a week by myself back in 2018 because I was still studying. At the time, I was doing a semester abroad in Kyoto, and Seoul is expensive. I decided to book a room in a hostel. It was supposed to be a mixed dorm for 6 people. Upon arrival, I found out that I was actually going to be sharing a room with 5 other men who were already staying at the hostel. At this point, I was still quite naive and didn't think much of it. Besides, the hostel was already fully booked. There was one guy from Japan, 1 Korean, 2 Chinese, and a German in my room. The German guy gave me weird vibes from the beginning, especially by the way that he'd just stare at me. But I brushed it off because I'd be out and about all day anyway. Every day he'd ask if I wanted to go hang out and to see the sights together, which I really like to do on my own. So I always came up with an excuse. One time I accepted his invitation to explore Gangnam, and it was just awkward. We had very little to speak about besides small talk. When I'd get ready in the morning, as in apply makeup and do my hair, he'd just stand there and watch, saying nothing. I got annoyed and asked him if he didn't have to be somewhere else several times. He'd just shrug. Anyway, for the entire week I was weirded out, but did my best to avoid him. One time we ran into each other at a cafe in the city center, which I found strange because what are the odds? The other guys in my dorm room were actually super nice. We even all went out for dinner one night. Then, on my very last day, I woke up too early and drifted back to sleep. The next time I woke up, it was to him sitting by my bedside caressing my arm and shoulder. I immediately sat straight up and asked what he was doing. Even though it was only my arm he was touching, I felt so disgusted. I always thought of myself as someone who'd scream and curse at someone in a situation like this, but I was simply dazed and shocked. He then went on to confess his love for me, how he wanted to meet up when we were back home. I'm from Germany too, and how I was just so special. When I pointed out that he couldn't possibly be in love with me because it had only been a week, he insisted he just knew that he wanted to show me his affection. At this point, I was just nauseous. Of course, he was leaving that morning too, and offered to go to the airport together. I insisted to take a later bus, and he thankfully left it at that. I couldn't wait for him to just go and leave me alone. I'm glad I didn't run into him at the airport, but at some point I just burst into tears because it had been so exhausting to ward off his advances all week, and then gently tell him that I wasn't interested in him after he touched me while I was sleeping. I don't even know how I managed to remain so calm and polite to him, but who knows how he would have acted if I'd been aggressive. With hindsight, I think I should have just switched rooms. But up until that very last morning, nothing had actually happened, and I would tell myself that maybe the poor guy was just awkward and didn't mean it. After that, I never doubted my instincts again. So I was out walking the dog today, and I turned back to see what the dog was doing, and someone was following me and taking pictures of me. And as I noticed him, he hid behind a bush, started running, and he followed. I ran for my life, and he couldn't keep up, which I'm very grateful for. I don't know what the heck just happened. This is all just very new to me, just very strange. I'm just glad I'm safe, because I don't know what this person's intentions were. I just honestly feel like they didn't mean very well. Has anyone been through this? What can this have been? About a week ago, I, a 22-year-old female, met this guy at some bar in Michigan. My friends and I were playing this game where we would make up fake names to give out, so I gave him a fake name. He seemed nice and funny, and we had a good time together. We kissed a couple of times, danced together, etc. At one point in the night, I posed next to this photo booth and he took a picture of me. But I found out that he was too old for me, and I'm really not looking for anything serious. So at the end of the night, when he asked for my number, I told him no. And then I left and got onto the ferry that takes everyone back to the mainland. But then he got on too and sat with me, even though his friends were still back at the bar. I asked what he was doing, and he said, "Coming back with you." And I said, "No, my uncle would kill you. I live with my uncle." And he said, "I'll kill your uncle." He said it jokingly, but it still freaked me out. And I didn't like that he got on the boat with me. I told him when he got back to the mainland that he had to stay on the ferry and go back. He said fine, and he did. Then a couple of days ago, I got a notification. He found my Instagram and DM'd me that he found me and missed me. I have no idea how he found me, because again, I gave him a fake name and no information whatsoever. The only thing I can think of is that he reverse image searched the picture he took of me and found my Instagram there. I told him that was creepy, and that I told him that he was too old for me and not to contact me again. Then I blocked him. I feel like it was a huge breach of my privacy. Obviously, if I'm not giving you my information, I'm not interested. I'm just worried now that this is going too far. I hate how he found me using only a picture of me. It freaks me out. And I feel guilty, like this was my fault for kissing with him, dancing with him, and letting things get a little heated on the dance floor. But I had no idea that it would turn into this. Should I be worried that I'm in danger? Is there anything that I should do? I'm a 27-year-old female, and I have mild autism and ADHD. Warning, this story is probably a little convoluted, but I can answer questions later. I go to physical therapy for my ankle. Today, there was another patient who kept staring at me, and he was staring at me more than what's normal. I'm on the table doing a few newer exercises, and some from the prior visits. The new exercises required me to lay down on my side or my back, and at one point the man was in the chair across from me. I see that he has his phone out and holding it in a way that the camera was facing me. Probably nothing, right? I think he noticed that I was looking and he turned his phone, camera facing a different direction, away. But I don't know if he was recording me or not. Probably not, right? Fast forward and I'm still noticing that he hasn't taken his eyes off me. I'm in a low Fowler's position now, using the bands. He was across from me on the bars doing some balance exercises, and despite his therapist being on his left, he kept staring at me, who was to the right of him. And honestly, he looked like he wanted to do some not safe for work things. I gave him an extremely PO face, and he nodded as if to say something like hello, or I see you, or something to acknowledge my presence. But I was just really weirded out, to the point that if I could have run, I would have. I was celebrating St. Patrick's Day in Boston several years ago, when I was in college, and I realized that I had to pee really badly, but there wasn't anywhere that I could go. I decided to go into a random building and peed in a ginger ale bottle inside of an elevator. I closed the bottle just in time for the doors to open. I proceeded to walk outside with the bottle and then threw it in the garbage can. I walked away, and for some reason I turned around and I saw a man in a suit walk right up to the garbage can and pull the bottle out of the garbage can and put it in his bag, and then he looked right at me and then just walked away in a hurry. He wasn't a weird or strange looking guy. He didn't look homeless, and he didn't look like he had mental problems. It looked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. He must have felt how warm the bottle was, but he just grabbed it and secured it in his bag regardless. I will never understand why this happened, and frankly, I don't want to know. But it was the weirdest and creepiest thing to ever happen to me. Earlier on, there was a very loud knock at the door, and I answered it, and there was a man there with a clipboard. He said, "Hello, can you please donate to charity?" He had no uniform on or badge. He also didn't say what charity he was with. I said no, sorry, and shut the door. My mom then went to the door and then opened it after like 30 seconds, and he was already halfway down the street leaving. What are the possible reasons for this? And why did he only knock on my door?
I think it's possible that I was being paranoid or overthinking, but either way, it made my spidey senses tingle, and I'm a big believer in trusting your gut. I am a 31-year-old female, and I was recently visiting Amsterdam and had been traveling solo, so mostly seeing some museums and landmarks during the day. I visited a museum in the red light district during the daytime, so it was mostly filled with tourists. Despite that, I'd felt very safe walking around. I still tried to stay pretty alert to avoid pickpocketing, and also since I'd been clearly traveling alone. While I was in one of the rooms in the museum, I accidentally made eye contact with this older, 50s man a few times. You know when you're just looking around the room and it happens? Well, that just kept happening, maybe 4 or 5 times, to the point where I started to get a little squeaked out that I wasn't imagining it. So I stayed in the same room even longer than I would have, reading all the signs and entries before moving on, not making more eye contact, thinking that he'd of course continue to the next room. Well, he didn't. When I finally did move on to the next room, shocker, so did he. I did the same thing, taking my time to go through all of the exhibits in the room, waiting for him to proceed without me. When that didn't happen, I actually regressed back into the previous room to reread the items in there. Again, just thinking that he would move on, and then I could relax and enjoy the museum. So now I go back into the next room, thinking surely he will be gone, and he's not. And we make eye contact again. So I just moved forward to the next room, and so does he right after me. At this point, I am kind of freaking out internally. I'm alone and creeped out, but he hasn't really done anything to me, you know? I continue to read the signs in the room, and I notice he moves into the next room without me. I'm initially pumped, but as I am moving around the room between the signs, I can see him standing right by the entrance to the room I'd be entering next, just standing there. It's hard to explain, but he had turned around. I managed to end up in a corner of my room where there was no way for him to see me from his vantage point. So I stayed there extra long, reading the entry. After a few minutes, he actually came back into the room I was in and immediately looked over at me again, making eye contact. That was enough for me. At that point, he could probably tell, I think, that I was very aware of him, and it seemed, to me, that he tried to try and play it off nonchalantly that he'd re-entered the room, so he walked over to some of the other signs on the opposite wall. I took that chance to progress forward through the museum, lose myself in the other groups ahead, and exit as quickly as possible, looking back to make sure he wasn't following me. I'm glad nothing happened, and that I wasn't followed. I'm also a little bummed I didn't actually get to enjoy the museum, and missed out on a lot of it. I've had a few good encounters over the years, but today I'll share this one in particular. So, this happened back in my late teens. I was likely around 16 or 17 years old when this happened. Growing up, I was always a bit of a recluse and kept to myself. My friend circle was small, and I was bullied over everything under the sun. Pretty stereotypical shy, introverted, and troubled kid. I also grew up pretty straight-laced. My parents and older sibling had addictions to smoking, drinking, and harder drugs. To me, I had actively seen what it did to people and decided early on to stay away from those things as much as possible. When I got to my older teens, I loosened up a little bit, but still didn't really partake. Smoked a cigarette once, hated it. Drank beer once, hated it. My mom was always really open when it came to if her kids wanted to experiment. She would always say, if you're going to smoke drink, I'd prefer that you do it in the house instead of at a party or with friends. Luckily for her, I was a pretty mild-mannered child compared to my elder and younger siblings. So that meant that if I ever wanted to try something, she was pretty open to letting me get away with it. So when it came to New Year's Eve, I had interest in trying a mixed drink. Like mentioned above, I had tried a sip of beer and absolutely hated it. But I did think fruity drinks would be good, specifically interested in trying a fuzzy navel. My mom obliged, grabbed some for herself to have, and made me one drink to enjoy during the night. Since I didn't have friends to hang out with, nor did I care much for the end of one crappy year shifting into the next, I just spent my time as I usually did, which was to play video games. I had been lucky enough to have my own TV and console in my room to play whenever I wanted to, but because I was a paranoid kid with little experience in drinking, I wanted to be downstairs where my family was near. I was close to the only bathroom in the house, in case I needed to throw up. I lugged my PS2 downstairs and set myself up in our sunroom. This was during a cold winter, and when I lived where there was snow, so I was essentially in a fishbowl. 3 of the 4 walls were lined with half-wall glass, side by side, looking out into the darkness of the country night. On the far left of the room, where I was maybe 3 feet away from, was a door that led outside. The sunroom faces the road, which is maybe 30, 40 feet away. I fired up the kerosene heater, wrapped myself in blankets with my little drink, and delved into some RPG. I had my one drink and spent a couple of hours playing video games. It was likely close to midnight, because I remember celebrating with the rest of my family in the main part of the house after this. But I was sitting in a dark room with the light of the TV illuminating me and was pretty much in that fishbowl. Like any good gamer, I was fully invested in what was happening on the screen, so I have no idea how long they were there for. Out of the corner of my eye, I heard a sudden noise, the slap of a hand harshly against a window glass. With it being both winter and an old house, the glass made a strange wobbly noise. I immediately jumped and darted my eyes toward the sound. However, from looking at a bright screen in a dark room for hours to suddenly trying to figure out what was going on while looking at a dark window, my eyes did this weird thing where I couldn't really make out any features. I just saw a pale white guy grinning really intensely. I like to believe that I tend to react decently well in panic situations. Shortly after making himself known, like maybe 2 seconds, he took off. I shoved myself up from my spot as he began to run away, went 2 rooms over to where my elder brother was playing on his computer, and shakily told him that a guy was outside the window and just scared me. He immediately grabbed his gun and ran outside. Armed with my brother, I also went outside with him. I'm ridiculously curious and can get really bolstered when I have support. The pair of us went out and around the house. We saw the footsteps in the snow, a track from the road to the window, and then a more rushed pair away from the house. However, we saw no person. We also didn't see or hear any cars. Even when I first stood up after being scared, I didn't see a car's headlights. Obviously, after this, I just went back inside and decided I was no longer going to be playing video games at night in the sunroom anymore. I spent the rest of the night in a well-lit room, surrounded by family, and celebrated the new year properly with a second drink. There's just so many weird thoughts to this that I've thought of over the years. Who was out at that time? Was he drunk? Was he driving drunk and decided this was going to be a funny prank? Or was he just walking around at 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve in the country? Did he just have an impulse moment because he could see a light on in a relatively dark home? How long was he watching me? What else was he doing while he was watching me? What was the point of scaring me? Just for the reaction? I saw his hand, heard the sound of that slap. Why didn't he have any gloves? If he had a car, did he park his car in the driveway? Or was his car just turned off in the middle of the street so he could do this? He was only 2 windows length away from the door that led to me. Had he had any darker intentions, he could have easily opened that door and gotten inside. My parents were listening to some TV show loudly in their room, way over on the other side of the house, and my brother always plays on the computer with noise-canceling headphones. This is the part that scares me the most, even though it obviously never happened. Was likely never his intention, and this all was probably just a prank. Sometimes the thought of what could have happened is scarier than the actual scare. Not knowing the intentions behind someone's thoughts and actions is what gets to me. I have no clue if this counts as essay, but I gave it a content warning just to be sure. Also wanted to clarify since people were getting confused in the comments. These are 2 separate encounters in the same day, 2 different guys. It was a nice day out today, and I didn't want to waste money on DoorDash, so I figured why not walk to a nearby restaurant. It's 20 minutes walking distance from my house, and I wanted to get my steps in. I wore shorts and a shirt. It was 70 degrees. I made a pit stop at the smoke shop, and this was my first encounter with a guy who doesn't understand the word no. He stops me as I'm passing by him, and he asks what my name is. I tell him, then he asks for my number. Then I say, no, thank you, I'm not interested. He introduces himself and tells me how old he is, then asks for my number again. I repeat once again, no thank you, I'm not interested. He's still persistent. Then he finally asks to put his number in my phone. I figured he can put his number in, and I can block him when I get home. I just wanted him to leave me alone, so I let him put his number in, and he tells me to have a good day, and we go our separate ways.
I tell my boyfriend about this encounter. He tells me I should have gave the guy his number instead. I make my way to the restaurant, and I'm passing some street. I'm walking briskly trying to get there and back, and this guy notices me. I didn't even have to look at him to feel it. I did not have to even turn around to feel his eyes watching me. I did not have to turn around to know he got in his car and started following me as I walked. It's almost like my body was alerting me of this, rather than my brain did, because I was not comprehending the situation at all. I turn my headphones down, and I hear him yelling after me, "Yo," repeatedly trying to get my attention. I ignore him and keep walking. This is when he gets in his car and starts following me, still trying to get my attention. He then pulls his car in front of me, kind of blocking my path. I see him in front of me and I get a sick feeling. One I won't ever forget. And this guy waves at me in the creepiest way possible, like a predator catching his prey or something. He tries to get me to come to his car. I shake my head and wave him off. I'm saying, "No thank you, I'm not interested." He's mumbling all kinds of stuff, saying things like, "You're beautiful. What's your name? Are you in a relationship?" All kinds of stuff. I'm frozen for a second looking at him. Then I look down, and I see that his pants are down. I see this, and immediately my legs start moving without my brain having to tell them to. Literally as if they had a mind of their own. I remember my mind going completely blank, and I didn't register this encounter as danger until I was walking away, reaching in my bag for my pepper spray, and my hands shaking to call my boyfriend. But I did not stop moving. Luckily, the guy sped off and didn't follow me after. I made it to the restaurant, but was too scared to walk back home, so I called an Uber. This has never happened to me before, and I know it doesn't seem like much, but the whole thing was terrifying. I keep thinking back on how my life could have been drastically altered in that moment in so many ways. Luckily, my body reacted way before my brain did, and got myself the heck out of there without even thinking about it. Every time I think about it, my heart starts racing. I didn't get his license plate because I was literally just so shocked, and I was focused on getting to a safe area away from him. I wish I would have stayed home and ate cereal. I'm scared to even walk anywhere else, even across the street to Kroger like I usually do. This literally ruined everything for me. Just a reminder of how you're never truly safe no matter where you are. Please be careful and pay attention to your surroundings, and don't give these weirdos the time of day. I just saw a TikTok about how certain butterflies mean certain things. And now that I think about it, I kept seeing a white butterfly in my backyard, outside my room window, before I left. Then I had another one following me as I was walking from the smoke shop, but I didn't think much of it at the time. But I don't know. They said it means ancestors watching over you, but who knows? Point still stands though. Pay attention to who and what is around you. My girlfriend and I were thrifting at Goodwill recently, and she went to go look at some clothes in front of the mirror. I stayed by the cart probably 15 feet away and kept looking at clothes. I look over at her, and I noticed that a bald, pudgy guy with a son that looked about 5 years old was behind her. He had his phone pointed towards her, and I really don't want to think that he was taking pictures of my girlfriend's butt, so I keep watching. He acts like he's looking for toys with his son for a second. Then when she turns around again, he takes out his phone and points it towards her. I immediately get filled with so much rage and walk over to him. I ask him if he's taking pictures, and he said, "Yeah, of my son. Isn't he so cute?" I say, "No, he isn't. You're taking pictures of something else." He said he wasn't. I said, "Show me your camera roll," and he said he didn't have to. And I said, "I really don't want to smash your phone and beat you in front of your child." He then started deleting the pictures while his hands were shaking, and I made him go to his recently deleted folder and permanently remove them. I then called him a piece of crap and to never do that again. I really regret not whooping his butt though. I've been super angry at the thought of him doing that to other people. and I really want to make him suffer. I live in a relatively walkable area of a city, and recently, this guy has been coming to our house and leaving things in the porch basket that we use to receive packages. We caught him on the Ring camera twice, and have since bought a Ring's paid plan so that we could watch the videos back. The first time, he left a pouch of weed and papers. The weed was sealed and the papers were not. We thought that it was promotion for the dab lounge across the street, but probably not. Mind you, weed is not legal in my state, but there are obviously loopholes. The second time, he returned within 30 minutes of the first and left a handful of Pokemon cards and a page torn out of an old journal filled with nonsense ramblings. He came back a third time today, 5 days after the first and second, and left a bowl, like for weed, and the package for a dog muzzle. We were able to watch the video back this time, and he came up to the porch smiling, put the bowl in the basket, then sat down to read a newspaper flyer or someone put on our doorstep. Then he added the muzzle packaging and left. I'm not sure if this sub is supposed to be for advice or not, but what the heck should we do in this situation? I don't know if calling the police would help anything, since he hasn't really done anything. Exactly. Sorry in advance. I was drunk most of the time during what happened, so I don't remember every detail. When I was 18 and freshly broken up with my way older boyfriend, I basically went crazy with dating guys. At the time, I also dressed very goth, even going as far as to wear a real corset and trench coat, mostly just enjoying the attention. One particular afternoon, my friend/roommate at the time decided to eat at a local Japanese restaurant, with both of us all dressed up. Our waiter was a mediocre skinny white guy who clearly was a little alternative, but it was kinda hard to tell with the uniform. We joked about me leaving my phone number on the receipt or something, so I hyped myself up and did so. Late that night, he had sent me a text. We talked for a few days, never really having a right time to meet up, as I worked 40 minutes away from where I lived. He mentioned the boots that he wore meant a lot to him, and some other odd things that just seemed like really edgy jokes. One really late night coming home, I was texting and driving, as any 18-year-old does, and we decided to meet up. My stupid self invited him over to my apartment, where it was just me and the roommate who had been with me before. Our other two roommates were not home. At first it was fine, because I was already drunk, so I would just let him rant about whatever he wanted. He went on about his life, going to jail, medical bills, his parents, etc. Eventually he asked me if I wanted to see his tattoos, and I was like, okay. He lifted up his shirt, and not only could I see the handgun tucked in his waistband, but also his multiple, badly covered up racist tattoos. One was even just slightly covered with a banana. I don't know what it was, but I simply decided the best way to deal with this situation was to appease him, so I went along with it casually. I don't remember exactly every detail because it was over 2 years ago and I was drunk, but he ended up pulling his gun out and putting it to my head, asking me if I was scared. I was immensely confused and tried to call his bluff, saying that I wasn't, which got him to put it away for a while. When he went to hook up, in my messy room, he pulled it on me again, saying that he wanted to do it with it out. I got mad and tried to fight him off of me and get it away from my head. Of course, I wasn't as strong as him and he hit me with the arm with it, which that hurt because it was a nice one. When I finally got him off of me and he realized that I was angry, not scared, he started acting like a crackhead, saying that I was crazy for not caring about him pulling a gun on me. He ran off, jumping the fence of my apartment complex, and not even taking his car that he had come in. In the morning, his car was gone, and I had a large bruise from where he had hit me. While to me it's a funny story, I now realize how bad it could have ended up. So, to the waiter from the Japanese restaurant, let's not meet. Recently, there was an Amber Alert, and my daughter was asking me what that beeping sound was all about. For those who don't know, an Amber Alert goes out when a child is reported missing. If you receive notifications, you know what I'm talking about. The alert will sometimes give information like the victim's appearance as well as the perpetrator, the location of the abduction, make and model of vehicle. My phone started beeping one evening while helping my daughter clean her room. An Amber Alert. She asked about it. I gave her a small rundown and that was that. However, it triggered a childhood memory I have where I believe with all my heart that I was almost kidnapped when I was a kid. To be clear, this isn't a memory that was laying dormant in my subconscious, and this random Amber Alert and talk with my kid caused it to resurface in my mind. This incident is something I've pondered and thought about off and on for years now. I'm 41. It's just been a while since I've considered the factors and details of the experience, and this recent Amber Alert and talk with my daughter really caused me to pause and reflect on the incident itself once again, and here I am. As a parent, you worry about these things and do all you can to protect your children, especially when you personally experience something truly scary like this. The occurrence happened when I was just a young kid. My guess is around 7, 8. I can't be sure, but I think that's a safe estimate based on the fact that much of those early childhood memories aren't there anymore. I do remember my kindergarten experience, which I would have been 5, 6, and also later grades. So this incident must have happened sometime after or around the ages of 7. 8, my parents took me to a neighboring city to do some shopping. We lived in a small rural town with not much on offer, so from time to time, we would go to this neighboring city about 45 minutes from where we were located. It just had more to offer. They would take me up there for school clothes shopping, out to eat because restaurants were better, and because my mom was a crafter. She loved to make crafts. It was her thing. There were different craft stores, and a fabric store she liked going to up there. This specific trip, we went to a fabric store up there, Joanne Fabrics to be exact. This was a pretty big store. As a little kid, I guess most every place seems big, but no kidding. This was a sizable store. My dad sat out in the car while I went in with my mom. He did that a lot, sit in the car. When there was a store, he just didn't want to go in, so I can't blame him there. I can't recall exactly what all my mom was looking for, or trying to get in that store that day, but I do remember what section we were in, an area with a bunch of racks with various fabrics hanging. Imagine a clothing store with circular racks with clothes hanging around them, and that's pretty much what it's like at this fabric store. Racks of hanging fabrics. I remember this area being slightly toward the beginning or entrance of the store. As my mom was looking through these racks, I began to wander, though not far, just enough to kind of look around myself. I was probably bored and started wandering around is my guess, but I could still see my mom just up and over a few racks away, so it wasn't like I was on the other side of the store or anything. A random man approached me, and honestly, I can't even remember at what direction he came from. It's just like I was there by myself 1 minute, and the next, I looked up and saw this guy. It was like he came in fast and out of nowhere. I quickly looked over to where my mom was. She had moved a few racks up and away, but I could still see her. There was a fair bit of distance between my mom and me at this point. So here I am, standing behind some rack of fabric with this older guy, opposite me and the other side of this rack. Then he speaks. "Hey little boy, how you doing there?" I remained silent because this took me completely off guard. He asked, "Where's your folks at? Are you alone in here?" I stood still and quiet. "Come here, I got something to show you." At this point, he started advancing toward me, coming around the rack to where I was. I quickly started the other way, but he stopped and started coming around the other way, as if to meet me in the middle. I was scared at this moment and became instantly aware that this man seemed dangerous and like he was trying to get a hold of me. "Come here," he barked. I jerked fast to the left, but he did the same. He had this wild look in his eyes. Whichever direction I went, he followed, but remember, there's a rack between us. God, I'm so thankful for that rack. After some back and forth movements from me and this man, I finally lock in on my mom and yell, "Mom, help!" You would have thought I screamed bloody murder. It was so loud, but it got my mom's attention. "What's wrong?" she asked. This startled the man, and he looked over his shoulder in the direction of my gaze and confirmed, "Yep, that must be his mother." His demeanor completely changes, and it's as if everything is just fun and games and he was just messing around. And he said as much to my mom. "I was just messing around with him." "No harm, ma'am." My mom came to where I was, and as we reconnected, the guy just tips his hat at my mom and makes his way out of the store. I explained to my mom what just happened, that this guy was trying to get me. I was so upset and shook up. She told me I did the right thing by yelling and getting her attention. It was terrifying for sure, and I'm thankful something crazy didn't happen. Could I have been imagining things like maybe this guy was really just messing around? I very much think there were nefarious intentions. Why would a random older guy be perusing a fabric store? If he was there for something like crafts or fabrics, why promptly leave when confronted? I truly believe he was up to no good. Anyway, that's my story. I appreciate anyone taking the time to read. This happened to me back in 2008 to the early 2010s. When I was 11, I met a girl who was the same age as me since 6th grade. She and I weren't the same classmates until high school, but we were the same school. By the middle of 6th grade, things got creepy. Somehow she was everywhere every time I had an extra class, including every time I had to switch from another schedule to another schedule. My entire life, I never gave my private information to her, but I was half aware she knew by her own eyes, even though she was a near sight. Unfortunately, I had reported it to the teacher-faculty members, but they brushed off my warning as a ruse because I didn't have enough evidence to prove it was her. What's worse, we weren't allowed to bright any electronic devices, like phones for example, for pieces of evidence against her, except calculator for maths and physics. This bothered me forever. She even shared the same home economics class and swimming lessons as mine during the 8th grade, but yet again not the same group. Even in 9th grade, she still kept following me non-stop, despite I warned her to leave me alone. After I graduated at 15, I left for a high school to start over, even though I forgot about her until the middle of October 2012. She's back. My skin turned pale as well, and my heart beat like I was in panic mode. This girl, how did she even know I'm in high school that I enrolled? And more importantly, I again didn't leak my information everywhere, not even to her. Once again, she won't leave me alone, and she starts to get worse. She guilt-tripped me into befriending her to let her use my belongings whether it was permission or not. Despite her soft manner, it was a red flag to begin with, that I could have avoided it sooner. On the other time, she overheard me and my classmate conversing about mine wanting a key charm that my classmate had. But on the next day, she attacked me after I took a seat in the class because she knew that I wanted something that she didn't. This incident caught the attention of the principal in my high school, and the principal recapped the whole situation by writing a statement report. I ended up rewrite twice because of error grammar, and by the third, the principal made the decision. She was suspended for a week, but it wasn't enough. She returned after a week and accused me of her suspending, which I wasn't involved in with her drama.
even though I didn't have another choice but to report my statement for my safety. And once again, she guilt-tripped me for other reasons by hypocritically calling me for being a terrible friend. Even so far, she destroyed one of my belongings and supplies. I called her out, but she pretended she didn't remember it. Worse, she framed a student for having a torn notebook that she destroyed, and yet she refused to admit her mistakes. That was my last straw, as it made my blood boil. But I didn't want to show my anger as she gave me a watch in exchange for money, which, turns out, she swindled and got away with it. In all situations, half of my peers and teachers witnessed this incident and warned me that I should end her friendship with her. She wasn't my friend, just saw me as a pawn and manipulated me by taking advantage of my kindness and trust. We were still in the same in high school, but I quietly outright not to be close with her again. That's it, until early December of 2012. That was the last time I saw her, and I guessed that she was expelled after the last warning from one of my peers. I felt relieved, but I will never forget what she did to not only me, but to the other half of my peers as well. By near the end of high school, I realized that she was indeed not a very good friend, and her attitude was sociopathic, manipulative, liar, and almost creepy. And that was the reason why I ended things with her for good. Luckily, I didn't give her phone number or address since that wasn't allowed in the school, which I managed to avoid the red flag. It's been almost 16 years since this incident took place. After I finished my high school in 2015, I'm almost 27 and currently have a job. The experience made it difficult to trust someone or befriend them again. I used to be a surveillance investigator for insurance claims, work injury stuff, to see if people who claimed to have been hurt at work and were collecting free money were actually not injured. I did this full time for about 10 years. Doing a new case every few days for 10 years, you see a lot of weird stuff. For example, one time I saw drug dealers in a downtown city literally riding horseback. You see scary stuff too, obviously, if in bad neighborhoods, etc. Scariest encounter went down about 20 years ago. This was a case in a somewhat rural area, which were always the toughest. You get there at 6 a.m., see what cars are in the vicinity, and run plates to see if they match the person. Then mostly you watch for the registered vehicle to depart if you found one. This place had one car in the driveway with no plates, which actually was quite unusual. You are also provided an age/height/weight of the person, and in rare cases a pic. So I knew this was a guy in his mid-30s, average height and weight. First day it turned out he left before I got there. Protocol is if you can't confirm they are home by 10 a.m., 4 hours on site, you literally need to knock on their door to confirm if they are home. You usually pretend to be a UPS delivery in a costume and a dollar store item in an envelope with a clipboard. Surprisingly, that works. Anyways, no one was home. Second day, came back at 5 a.m., and lo and behind a second vehicle was there. A truck. Also with no plates. The dude came out around 5:30 a.m. and left. I followed him, but he was immediately wise and knew he was being followed, which usually means they are up to no good, i.e. working while collecting insurance disability money, aka insurance fraud. I let him go while trying to be discreet about it. I came back the third day in another car, which you also sometimes had to do. This time he left again early, and I successfully followed him to a farm in the neighboring rural hills. In short, I busted his butt on video doing heavy-duty farm work for several hours. He eventually caught on and realized he was being watched. I took off from my parked position and thought there was no way he could suddenly get off his tractor, run to his truck and get to me as there were driveways, etc. between us and also a creek. Somehow, he was then suddenly on my butt in his truck in some scary rural mountain roads. I was scared and kept driving, and somehow I made it to the freeway. I had literally been lost in the mountains.
On the freeway, he followed me for miles, and I couldn't shake him. He would pull beside me at times and flex his arm and gesture pull over. Dude was actually pretty scary looking, and I had evidence on him that would cost him in more ways than one. There was an easy pass bridge about 20 miles up if I got that far, and at first I thought I could lose him there if he didn't have the easy pass, but then realized again he had no plates, so wouldn't matter. Anyways, after many miles, I finally was able to shake him, but he remained pretty close behind. I exited the freeway and found a gas station. A cop was there, and I reported this guy and his truck. The cop made a call, and I didn't see this guy pull up. Shortly thereafter, I gassed up my car and left and drove home and submitted my report. I'm sure his free insurance money ended at the very least. Scariest part, actually, is that I was worried this guy had my license plate and could run it somehow, as I was able to do for work, and locate where I live. I began to research him online. Sometimes in that line of work, you learn the potential insurance fraud of the person you are following is the least of their criminal endeavors. Well, I learned this guy was a hardcore convicted felon who had been in federal prisons and was a gang member and hard drug user and dealer. I was scared, but nothing happened over the next few years, and I eventually forgot about it. But about 5 years later or so, I had a case in the same rural area again and thought about this guy. I wanted to Google him to see what the police blotters revealed about him in the last few years. I Googled him again and discovered he was actually dead. I learned that a couple years prior, he had taken his girlfriend hostage with a gun, killed someone who tried to help her, then was killed himself by another person who actually saved her. Don't need to worry about meeting him again. So I went for a hike with my boyfriend for his birthday today. We're not very superstitious people, but we were quite anxious the whole time. We didn't meet anyone on the road, and I was feeling weird. Like I was thinking, I know we're going to meet someone, but that someone I wasn't chill about. My boyfriend was a bit nervous, which is unusual for him, as he's very used to hiking pretty much anywhere. Alright, so we're 4+ hours into the hike, and we reached almost the end. There was some sort of cabin in the forest, and a guy looking like Tom Hanks in Castaway was there. He jumped out of his cabin, naked with a knife, and began to make grunts. I told my boyfriend he has a knife, and the guy started to run at us. My boyfriend told me to run, go, and I tried my best, as I'm not the most sporty girl. I believe I fell a few times because I have a lot of scratches and a bump on the shin, but I didn't feel it in the moment. After what felt like forever to run to escape him, we've succeeded to find a way out of the neighborhood and then a road. We felt so much relief at that moment. My question is, we felt shocked and pretty traumatized by it. Do you feel like it's a serious event, or is it not that big of a deal? I know that it might sound stupid to ask, but we don't know anymore. Maybe we're overreacting. We did report him to the police, by the way, and they are supposed to go to the place, but we're not sure that they're going to take their time for that. What were his intentions? Were we trespassing on his property? What was he doing out there? Do you think he might follow us?